Hi, Namita.
Hi, Trupti. You can hear me, right?
Yeah, clearly.
Okay, lovely. Adarsh, is there like a chat feature for people to put in questions?
Yeah, so it's a common chat where they can put in questions for everyone.
Where is that? I can't even see that. Oh yeah, there is a chat. Okay, fine, great. So Tripti, we'll be able to see everyone that just logs on, right?
Yeah, I'll be able to see the participants as they log on. We'll all be able to see all the participants.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I guess we have some time. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm just going to wait for a few more minutes before we get started. Thank you.
Oh my God. Oh. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to speak about understanding undergraduate admissions at the University of Cambridge and the University of Oxford. I'm just going to wait for a couple more minutes before I get started, as we have some more attendees just joining in.
Is there a way I can send Kate the street finders, or do you only have the link? Oh, no. That's what I meant. Would you then send one to Kate and then I'll put it in?
Okay, thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you to the IEC committee for inviting me to speak. My name is Namita Mehta. I will introduce myself in a moment. I'm going to be speaking about the undergraduate application process to the University of Cambridge and the University of Oxford today. Okay, so before I introduce myself, there's a chat box that you can access at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Please feel free to put questions in there. My presentation will take about 20 to 25 minutes, after which I'm going to ask, we can have a more of an interactive session and I'll answer all your questions. So thanks for joining me today. I'm Namita Mehta. I actually grew up in Hong Kong, where I attended a German school. I then went on to complete my A-levels at a British boarding school, after which I completed my undergrad and my master's program at the University of Oxford, and I majored in molecular and cellular biochemistry. Ever since I graduated, I've been in the education over 12 years now. I do specialize in working with potential Oxford and Cambridge candidates, where I help them with the application process, specifically train them for the interview and guide them, with the application processes. I do actually also work with students who are looking at North America, Southeast Asia, and Canada, and I do help with them with that application process as well. So I do understand global admissions, and today I'm going to be focusing on Oxford and Cambridge admissions. Okay, so let's get started. Oxbridge, so that stands for the University of Oxford and the University of Cambridge. I'm first going to speak a little bit about why Oxbridge. I mean, we all speak about best fit universities and how students should apply to universities that are going to be a good fit for them. And this is certainly the case for Oxford and Cambridge because they're very, very niche and there's certain characteristics about them. The picture in the background is of the University of Oxford. There's the Sheldonian Theatre on the left-hand side, and then there's a beautiful quad and a college on the right-hand side. So why Oxford? Why Cambridge? Firstly, they are among the most, they have an amazing history. They're among the most, the oldest universities in the English-speaking world. They've been around for around 1,000 years, and they have notable alumni that we all know about, and some of them are noted down here. Oxford and Cambridge are also known for their academic excellence and their world-class teaching. They're highly ranked universities, and they've continuously been in very high positions in rank tables. I'm not a big fan of rank tables per se, but parents and families do care about that, and there is a huge prestige attached to studying at highly ranked universities. So Oxbridge does always tend to come among the top contestants in rank tables. So this is just something to be aware of. I'm going to spend a bit of time speaking a little bit about the teaching methods. Oxford and Cambridge are known for their tutorial system, which is known as tutorials at Oxford and supervisions at Cambridge, which is a very unique system. Many US universities have adopted this style of teaching as well. And what it is essentially that you meet one-on-one with your professor or your tutor on a weekly basis, and you discuss your subject area. It's not just that you submit a paper and you get graded on it. You're actually expected to discuss whatever you've submitted. Typically, you are asked to submit something a day before your tutorial or a supervision. The tutor goes through it, and you often meet with them sometimes one-on-one or on a 2-to-1 basis, and you discuss that. And essentially, that's kind of the USP of an Oxbridge education. You get access to professors who are experts in their field of study. You're not necessarily, you're speaking with them, you're discussing the subject area, and they are often professors who are doing the latest research in that particular field. And they're going to discuss their research with you. They're going to prompt you to think out of the box and answer questions that are not necessarily, where the answers aren't necessarily available. So that's essentially the USP of the Oxbridge system. Every subject that you study has this system. So besides lectures, practicals for science students or lab sessions, and in smaller classes and seminars, the tutorial and the supervision system is the USP at Oxbridge. And you often do these, once a week while you're there. And there are 3 8-week terms at Oxbridge. So you have 3 terms, and it's every week during term time. Oxford and Cambridge also follow a collegiate system where essentially you belong to an Oxford or a Cambridge college, and essentially that is your home. But and that is kind of where most of the social life, where the social life is, and where you have oftentimes you eat together in your college. Your dorms are sometimes there unless you decide to live out one or 2 of the years. There's a library, there's a common room there. And then students are also a part of a wider department, and that's more related to your academic area of interest. At the end of your time at Oxford or Cambridge, it doesn't matter which college you went to. That doesn't go on your degree. But the collegiate system is more about the social aspect at Oxford and Cambridge, and you belonging to a college. So typically, when you meet an Oxford alumni, the next question you will ask them is, which college did you go to? So yeah, I think there are a few US universities that have also adopted this system, but it's very, very special and very unique to the Oxford setup as well. So career prospects as well, these are some of the starting salaries. I know they're not as high as some of the universities in US and Canada, but it's about $40,000 to $42,000 is the starting salary for students that end up graduating from Oxbridge. And I just want to say that a lot of students who end up studying at Oxbridge also end up going on to do go on to do more degrees, go on to do more higher education. They often look at doing a master's or a PhD after they study. This is not always the case, and many of them will go on to get jobs as well. But there are a huge proportion of students that will look into going into academia as well. Okay, so applying to Oxford, I think that's why we're all here today, and I want to speak a little bit about the application process, what these universities are looking for, and how you can help your students stand out. So if I speak about what makes you a competitive applicant, I'll quickly walk you through these points over here, and they will sound very similar to global top highly ranked universities. They want you to be intellectually curious. They're looking for students that have academic ability and potential, the ability to think critically and independently, and the willingness to argue. I mean, a tutorial and a supervision session, typically there's a lot of arguing happening, but also keeping an open mind and listening to ideas that others have as well. So these 4 points, forget the middle one for a second, they do pertain to other universities in the world as well. The middle one, suitability and enthusiasm for your course. Now that is very, very important, because unlike universities in North America, where you are able to have, spend 2 years really figuring out what you want to major in, you can dabble in different courses, really take some time to take some time to figure out what you want to eventually study. You have to know this in advance to even applying to Oxford or Cambridge or actually any other UK university. So I studied molecular and cellular biochemistry, and that's all I did for my 4 years there. I did not get the opportunity to do any history courses or German courses or any other subjects that I might have been interested in doing. So you really have to be sure what you want to study, because that's all you're going to be studying for your 3 or your 4 years there. So suitability and enthusiasm for your course. And it's the depth of study that you're going to get at Oxbridge and a lot of other UK universities. You're going to be studying that subject in a lot of depth rather than breadth. So you really have to be passionate about your course and really want to know more about it. And you will go into a lot of detail, and you will really spend time really dissecting that course and going into its history and really understanding, where the whole subject comes from, and what is also happening in the research space in that particular field at that particular time when you're reading that program. Okay, so there are 3 main things to remember when you're applying to Oxbridge, which differ from other UK universities, and I'm quickly going to speak about them and spend some time discussing that in detail with you. First of all, at the undergraduate level, you can only apply to Oxford or Cambridge. You cannot apply to both universities. Secondly, is that the application deadline for Oxbridge is usually 15th of October of the student's grade 12. So that's 3 months earlier than the regular UK deadline, which is 15th of November. After you submit your application through the UCAS form, I'll speak about that in a minute, you will be expected to sit an entrance test in the particular subject that you've applied for. And these are often very academic, well, all the time academic. They're not general knowledge questions, or they're not questions that ask you to discuss your resume. They are very specific questions about the course that you want to study. If you do well on this test, you are invited for an interview, and for all these years, there has been a face-to-face on-campus interview, and students are invited to Oxford or Cambridge for 2 days. These interviews can also happen online, but it's a big part of the interview process. And these interviews are kind of set up like a mini tutorial or a mini supervision. So they're basically testing to see whether you would thrive in that system or not. So these are the 3 unique things that are part of the Oxbridge application process, and I'll speak a little bit about more of them. I'll speak a little bit about them in detail now. Okay, so there's a timeline here on the slide about the application process. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about fit here. Unlike the US application process, where it's very holistic and they really look at you in many different aspects. They look at your data, you know, what grades you have, how you've been faring. They look at your talent, what extracurricular activities you've been involved in, and then also assess your essays and look at what the teachers have to say about you. At Oxbridge and also other UK universities, they will publish on their website something called a minimum entry requirement, which is essentially the minimum grade that they require you to have to be eligible to apply in their particular course. And they do this by curriculum. So for example, say you want to study economics at Oxford. They'll say that, you know, if you're an IB student, they want you to have a 38 to 39 points in the IB with a 7 in do not have a 7 in higher level math, or you haven't taken higher level math, you are not eligible to apply. So they already give you some prerequisite conditions before you can even look at these universities. So when you're advising students, you need to make sure that they match that. Typically, if you're a US student, they're looking for you to have done, for your students to have taken 5 AP subjects and achieved a 5 in all of them. So it's that competitive. They don't have to have achieved that before applying, but they have to achieve that by the time they finish grade 12. So what you can do is you can put down that you intend to take those APs at the end of grade 12. And typically, all the Oxford, Cambridge, and other UK universities, their admission is conditional. So it's based on you actually achieving those grades at the end of grade 12. So let me talk a little bit about the process. First is, you know, you apply through a system called UCAS. And again, unlike the US, where there is there's a sense of private colleges and public colleges, 99.9% of colleges in the UK are public. They are owned by the British government, and you apply through the centralized system called UCAS. When you apply to Oxford or Cambridge, October 15th is the deadline for these universities, but you also have to apply to the other 4 universities at the same time. Again, it's like the Common App form, but there's no specific supplement here. You have to submit one form. And the personal statement that you write will be seen by all the 5 colleges that you apply to. So you have to apply to the same course or the same major in all the 5 universities, otherwise your personal statement will not make sense. I will spend a little bit of time talking about the personal statement later, but essentially this is a 4,000 character statement, like one side of A4, justifying to the university why you're a good fit to study that particular subject. I'll discuss that in a minute. But anyway, you submit your UCAS application, and then for Cambridge, there are additional application forms that you need to submit, the COPA and the SAQ, and these are the deadlines to submit those applications, those forms, which require additional questions, and sometimes they do require you to submit your high school grades through the 9th and 10th and 11th and 12th. Typical UK universities do not require you to submit your 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade grades. They just want to know, they want to know how you're going to fare at the end of the 12th grade, and if you've taken any board exams in the 10th grade, they want to know the grades for that. So that's like IGC exams that you might have taken or any APs that you've done in the past already. After that, you are invited to take these tests. A school can become a test center. They can apply to do it, or you can apply to do these tests at the closest the British consulate in your city. And like I said, they're very academic tests. If you do well in these tests, again, that's a hurdle. You are invited for the interview, which usually happens in person, but obviously because of COVID this year, they've announced that this year they're not gonna be in person, they're gonna be online interviews. And then that's the biggest hurdle. A lot of students are invited for interviews and then they do not get the conditional offer. But if you do and you pass the interview, you are then given a decision in January, around mid to end January. And these are often conditional, like I said. They will say to you that, yes, we will give you an offer, but you must achieve 5 5s in the 5 APs that you told us you're going to study. And typically there's no leeway here. If you end up getting, 4 5s and one 4, you're unlikely to keep your spot. So they're pretty strict about that. And they're also very particular about the subject that they want, which they mention upfront on their websites for the course that you want to study as well. I worked with a student who ended up getting a 44 out of 45 in the IB, but didn't have the 7 in math, and that's what they needed for economics. And Oxford said no. So it's just bear that in mind. This is just a table to show you the kind of tests that they require you to study, that they require you to take. Again, the point of this, all of this information is available on the website, but the point of this slide is just to show that they're very specific academic tests that they're asking you to sit. Again, if you're applying to mathematics at Oxford, they want you to sit something called the mathematics admissions test, where if you're applying to Cambridge, they require you to sit the STEP tests. Now, most of these tests are taken in November, right after you submit your application, but the STEP tests, for example, happen the summer after you apply, and then it's the conditions are based on how you fare on that as well. So all of these tests that they require you to do, there's past papers on their websites, there's past papers available, that's all very readily accessible. So students who are seriously considering applying to these universities need to ensure that they've at least done a few tests, done a few practice tests, and that they're doing well in that. Just something about the tests, after speaking to some of the Oxford tutors, they like to see that they're not expecting you to be able to answer every single question on these tests from beginning to end. Oftentimes they are going to be more challenging, these questions. They rather students finish questions on the test than just half attempt all the questions. So that's just something that some of these tutors have shared with me. Okay, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the interview. These interviews are academic in nature. They're not resume-based interviews. Sometimes they will start off by, asking you something that you might have written about in your personal statement, a particular interest that you might have had, like an academic interest. They're not going to ask you about your taekwondo or your swimming or anything like that. And it is predominantly to see how you think. And they're probably going to ask you something you don't know, and they want to see how you maneuver that. I can give you my example. When I walked into my molecular and cellular biochemistry interview, they just literally threw a molecule on the desk and asked me, what molecule is this? I had no idea. I had no idea. I mean, I did not memorize molecules. I did not know what it is. So I said, I don't know what it is, but I can discuss its chemical and physical properties. So they're like, okay, that's a great start. So we started talking about that. We discussed particular configurations of electrons. The discussion went on. And then from the chemical properties that I discussed, they asked me questions about the biological nature. It kind of went on, and they prompted me along the way. In the end, I did not get that this molecule that they were talking to me about was cholesterol. I wasn't able to label it, but they were able to assess that I could think analytically and that I was able to talk out loud what I was thinking, which is essentially how a tutorial or a supervision works. So sometimes they have set questions. For the technical subjects, they might even ask you to do a paper in front of them. They might throw a sum at you. For physics interviews or engineering interviews, they ask you to sketch graphs. I was also asked to draw a genetic cross. For more arts interviews, they can ask you to read a passage and ask you to discuss that. So it is very academic, and I think the main thing that I would say is that students have to obviously have read above and beyond the subject, have a passion to discuss it, and be very vocal if they really don't understand what the tutor is asking for, and talk through their thought process, which is what would work. Okay, so before I end, I'm quickly going to speak a little bit about the personal statement. Like I mentioned, this is very different from the Common App prompt, the Common App essay that US universities ask for. It is not a personal reflection. It is not a story about yourself. It is an academic. It is a little bit more academic in nature, where you are justifying to the universities why you are a good fit to study that particular course. So they want you to talk about, why you're interested in studying economics, or why do you like history so much? They want you to explain that. If you've done any research in that particular field, if you've done an extended essay, or if you've written an extensive paper on it, mention this in your personal statement. They love it. If you've done an internship in that field as well, they want to know about it. You can mention your extracurricular activities, but you need to connect it back to your course. So yes, you are a national level swimmer. So how is that going to help you to study physics? Yes, it's taught you perseverance. It's taught you how to be very patient. It's taught you that you have very great working habits. And all of this can help you as a physics student. Eventually, you just have to kind of tie everything back to your course. This stands true not just for Oxbridge, but for UK universities in general. They just want to make sure that first of all, that you're sure you want to study that particular course, because there's really no scope to change. You cannot go to a UK university or Oxford or Cambridge and say, hey, I applied for chemistry, but not sure I want to do that anymore. I mean, they will ask you to reapply or they'll ask you to leave. You cannot, there's really a little scope for changing. So you have to be sure upfront what you want to do. And again, like I mentioned, this personal statement is seen by all the universities that you apply to. So you do not mention any specific university here. You do not mention, very looking forward to attending Oxford. You can't say that because there's another 4 UK universities that you're going to put down on that form as well. It doesn't cost extra to do that. You just have to submit the UCAS form. And it's
I'm on a webinar right now, but we'll call you back when finished.
Okay, so that's about the personal statement. I am going to move on to questions. Thank you so much. This brings me to the end of my presentation, and I'm just going to look at some of the questions. You can unmute yourself and ask as well. Okay, so there's a question here on when you apply to Oxford, is it better to apply open or to a specific college? Okay, so that's a great question. So typically what I ask students to do is to look at, first of all, identify the course that they want to study. So say it is physics. Now, when you apply, each of these colleges will have a tutor that is going to be your physics tutor. So what I ask students to do is to look at colleges where they're interested in that particular tutor's research. So that's a great way to kind of say that I chose your college because I know you're going to be my tutor for the next 1 or 2 years. Of course, you also get tutored. You also get tutorials with other professors in other colleges, but that tutor is essentially going to be your tutor. That's one thing to look at. But in general, if you are worthy of a space at Oxford, then it doesn't really matter whether you apply open or whether you apply to a specific college. So typically what happens, I did not mention this in my presentation, is that you typically have 2 interviews. So if you apply to a specific college, they will interview you. And then there's a second interview that you take with another college that is assigned by Oxford or Cambridge. And what they do is like they'll kind of give you a score out of 10. Like they'll say like, okay, I might have got like a 5 out of 10 in my first interview and a 9 out of 10 in my next interview. So my score is 14. I'm just kind of like, they do this, but I'm not sure. This is not exactly the scale that they use. Now, for biochemistry, they admit 100 students every year. So the top 100 are going to get a space at Oxford. So I, for example, applied to St. John's, but my score wasn't high enough for St. John's to want me, but my score was high enough for St. Peter's to take me. So essentially, that's just something to keep in mind, that if you are good enough to get a place at Oxbridge, you will get it regardless of whether you apply to a specific college or whether you apply open. The other thing is that you should also understand the geography of these cities. Because I studied at Oxford, I do know that there are certain colleges that are very close to certain departments. Like Keble is right next to Science Park, Wadham is on the way, Trinity and Balliol are like a walking distance away as well. If you were in St. Anne's or if you were in St. Hilda's, you'd need a bike to kind of cycle up to your department. So sometimes just looking at the geography of the city can also help, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, so the next question is, can you address the exams to Oxbridge? Do you know if they will be virtual this year? Okay, I have mentioned, like I mentioned, the exams are very specific. Oxford or Cambridge have not announced whether these exams are going to be virtual or not. So the students that I'm working with that are applying this year, I'm encouraging them to go ahead and register with the centers. The registrations will only start the beginning of September. So we just have to wait and watch. Both of the universities have announced that all interviews are going to be online this year. So that's all I know so far. No, so can a student apply to more than one college within Oxford or Cambridge? No, you can only put down one college and then the second college is assigned to you. Is there an application fee for UCAS? Yes, there is an application fee. I think it is about £26. And that is the one fee that you pay to send out the whole UCAS form. So whether you put only Oxford or Cambridge or whether you put 5 colleges on your UCAS form, there's only one fee that you need to pay. Can we get a copy of the slides? I believe that this presentation is going to go up on IECA as a YouTube video, so you can access it there. What are the chances to get an interview at Oxford or Cambridge? Okay, so I think it really does depend on how you fare on that test as well. I mean, first of all, you need to make sure that you have the minimum grades required for the course that you apply to. Like if you apply to physics without a 7 in the curriculum that you're studying, or without the highest grade in the curriculum that you're studying, and you don't do well on that test, they might not invite you for an interview. So I think the data changes every year, and I can't necessarily say that it's easier to get an interview in one place or another. So yeah, sorry, Ali, I cannot answer that question. Okay, if a student doesn't have access to IB program, will the student be considered if he has attended a school that doesn't have too many offerings for AP, but has done well with his opportunities? So Glenda, typically they wouldn't, because unfortunately the rigor that they require students to have, or the academic ability, is what they list. They're like, if you're an American high school diploma student, we require you to have 5 APs at grade 5. You can always email colleges and ask them and see. Sometimes they will agree, and what they will do is they'll use the other parts of the application process to possibly allow him or her to apply. So they will see how he or she fares on that entrance test, and how he or she fares in the interview as well. But you know, typically they're not very accommodating, or they're not very kind to students who haven't met their minimum entry requirement, just because it's so highly competitive. And if you aren't able to do that much, you probably won't be able to cope with the academic rigor. And it's true to some extent. It is true, because I'll give you an example of myself. Like molecular and cellular biochemistry, A-level math isn't a prerequisite to study that course. But I felt really bad for anybody who entered my program who hadn't studied A-level math, because if you hadn't, you pretty much had to teach yourself the A-level math course in the first 6 weeks of being at Oxford, because they wouldn't wait for you. They just kind of went on to calculus and viral loads, and you just kind of went boom, boom, boom. And that wasn't even a requirement. So I think they just want to make sure that whoever's going to be attending Oxbridge are going to be successful when they reach the campus. So they're not very accommodating to these things. But like I said, you can email a particular college, have a conversation with the tutor, explain why that student hasn't had an opportunity to sit those APs, and they might say, well, okay, let them apply anywhere, and let's see how they fare on the entrance test. When interview, are all interviewers from the college where the student applied, or from multiple colleges? Okay, so when you interview, typically you will be interviewed by 2 or more tutors from that particular college, and then you are interviewed at another college, and there'll be tutors from that particular college. Some students are invited for a panel interview, where there are interviewers from several different colleges, but that's very rare. Typically, it's 2 or 3 interviewers per interview, and they're usually from that particular college where you've applied. Does that make sense? What if Oxford is the only English university the student is applying to? Should they mention Oxford in the personal statement in that case, or no? Well, yeah, I mean, if you're only applying to Oxford, and I mean, the personal statement isn't really going to go anywhere else, then sure, you can mention Oxford. But I always encourage students to look at other UK universities as well. There's no extra cost. Oxford is so competitive that there's some fantastic universities out there besides Oxford and Cambridge that are very highly ranked, that are very, very good, have excellent teaching. Another university that follows, the collegiate system, has tutorials, is also Durham University. So putting that down, there's no harm, and I would encourage students to do that rather than, just simply look at Oxford or Cambridge, because it's not gonna, by mentioning Oxford in the personal statement, you're not gonna get any brownie points, because their application process is so rigorous. So yeah. It's around 26 pounds. It might have gone up this year. I'm not sure at the top of my head, but it's for all 5. So you submit one UCAS form. So whether you only put down Oxford or you put down Oxford and 4 other universities, it's the same fee. You don't have to pay per university. It's not like the Common App. I'm a high school student from California. Due to the virus situation, both of the test centers that administer the admissions test I need for my will not be administering the exam in November. How can I complete the entrance test? Okay, that's a great question, and I think you just need to wait because you usually the registrations for the entrance tests only open in September. So if you cannot access a center, I'm sure Oxbridge will come up with an alternative like they did for the interviews. They announced very early on that they're all going to be online. So it's the same situation in India. And Mumbai cases, the cases are just they're skyrocketing, they're just going up. So I cannot imagine centers being open. ACT, SAT centers are every month, the test is just getting canceled. So just wait and watch. They will kind of let you know what the alternative is. I wouldn't be surprised if they do an online invigilation or they send a test online, but I can't be sure right now. They haven't announced anything yet.
Yeah. So I heard that you can just like sign up during the summer as well. Like, is that true, or is it just starting from September?
So right now you can register for the tests. If you go to the PAT website, so the physics aptitude test, the physics admission test for Cambridge, Oxford, they say that the registration is open in September. So just wait, Rishi, and see what they say. And I don't think yours is a unique circumstance given COVID. I think there's going to be many test centers globally that are going to be shut. Typically, many schools would be test centers for Oxbridge, and it doesn't look like any of them are going to open anytime soon. So they will kind of announce alternatives. So just wait and watch. I think that's exactly what these universities, what they're doing as well.
Okay, I was just planning to take the math admissions test.
This for Oxford or Oxford?
For Cambridge.
For Cambridge, yeah. So just wait because they will announce. And if you haven't heard anything after September, just send them an email and let them know that you're in this situation. Mention the 2 centers that you could have done it, and show them that both these centers are closed and have clearly said that they're not going to open. And what is Plan B?
Okay.
But they will make an announcement. Just give them time. They're very slow. They usually wait till the 11th hour to announce things.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so you mentioned something about test centers being open in other places as well, Rishi?
Actually, I think someone responded in the chat that that some test centers are open in Montana and Colorado.
Yeah,
but,
so I mean, yeah. I guess you just have to wait and watch. And sometimes, if it's feasible for that student to get to a test center, you're better off doing the tests rather than not.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, Marla's asking, is there data on the percentage of accepted students who have applied in acceptable score ranges? For example, applied with IB7s. So Marla, what I did say was that Oxford and Cambridge published on their websites a minimum entry requirement. So that's like a minimum score that they need you to have before you apply. So if you're an IB student, they will say, so say, for example, you want to apply to PPE at Oxford, that's philosophy, politics and economics, they will say we require you to have a 42 or a 40 in the IB with 776 at higher level. So if that student's predicted grade is that or higher, then they're eligible to apply for that course. Then what happens is you end up doing the entrance test. If you do well on that, you're invited for interview. If you pass the interview, you're given a conditional offer. And these conditional offers are often the same as or higher than the minimum entry requirement. So they will say to you, yes, you've done well in the interview. You now need to go and get 42 points in the IB with a 776 at higher level. If you achieve that, then you're in. If you don't achieve that, you're not in. So I hope that answers your question. Typically, students who get their place are ones that have achieved the marks that are needed for that course. And there's very little leeway here. They're not very accommodating. Even if you miss your requirement by 1 point, they're not, they don't care. They'll just not accept you because there's enough students that have met their offers. Okay, where do we find the websites to register for the various tests? Susanna, you can email me, and I will. You can email me, and I'll send you the links for that. Okay, well, if anyone else has any questions, you can unmute yourself. Okay, you can unmute yourself and ask. I will just put my email address in here. With the A-level debacle, do you think that will change offers? Okay, so I think that there are going to be enough students who would have achieved their Oxbridge grades. So unless it is a student where the grade was, where they did not achieve the A stars and the A's that they needed to get the Oxbridge admission, those students will most definitely appeal the scores. And I'm sure the schools will support them if they think that that candidate deserves the scores to get into Oxbridge. But otherwise, I assume that the students who are who have been successful till this stage would have kind of got the grades that they need for Oxbridge. If a student doesn't have 3 APs, it's usually 5 APs of 5 that Cambridge wants, can he or she apply? So yes, you can apply with the intention of eventually doing 5 APs. So this is also the case for students that are in all other curricula. You apply in the beginning of grade 12, and no one has completed the IB by then. You typically apply then, and then you would say that I intend to take my IB next at the end of my grade 12, and that's why these offers are conditional. It is based on how you end up doing at the end of grade 12. So if the student has 3 APs, that's fine. They can just say that they're going to do another 2 the following May or whenever they intend to do it. And the school needs to predict them a 5 though. Does anyone else have any questions? Please feel free to unmute yourself. I'm happy to have a larger discussion.
Okay, I just wrote a question.
Okay.
It's for a student that wants to study English.
Okay.
And I've seen a lot of people talking about math or physics and sciences. I'm feeling like it's a little harder to write that academic personal statement about English. Maybe that's just in my head, but
no,
I was wondering
what to put in there.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, perfect. So, okay, and another thing that I also want to say is that for all courses at Oxford and Cambridge, they're departmental pages as well. So they'll have like a English department page, they'll have a computer science department page, and oftentimes they publish a reading list. That's the first place to start. Get literally copy paste that reading list onto an email and say start reading these books. And when you're applying for a subject like English, they are going to want to make sure that firstly, they need to kind of understand the curriculum at Oxbridge. And they're very transparent that this is the kind of stuff you're going to learn in your first year, this is what you're going to learn in your second year, this is what you're going to learn in your third year. So make sure that students are aware of that. I mean, even if you're applying for like history and politics, they might ask you something about British politics. You might not need to know you don't necessarily need to know about that particular period in history, but they'll give you enough facts to assume that you have that information, and then want to make sure that you're able to analyze that data or analyze that particular period of time. For English, it's really about going above and beyond the text that you've read in school. It's really about looking at authors that are very well-known authors from different genres and reading those, looking at the reading lists. maybe writing a paper on it. If they're an IB student, they might have done an extended essay in English, in which case write about that. If they haven't, or they've written, like if they've taken AP English, that's obviously an indication of their level of English. If they've ever done any kind of, any other research project in English, they can mention that as well. I hope that helps, Tamara.
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Okay. So to clarify, all AP scores have to be 5. So this is what happens, when students are applying to Oxbridge, when they're not in a typical British curriculum, like an A-level or a pre-U or an IB, which they know inside out, where there's an exam that they know what that exam entails, they typically say that a competitive applicant is somebody who would have 5 APs at grade 5. So I'm not saying that you must have that, it's good, or you're not going to get in, but that's what it's written on their website. Cambridge especially, they'll say that competitive applicants have 5 APs at grade 5. So we have some more time. So if anybody has any more questions, even specific about a particular student, I'm happy to answer them. Please feel free.
So to clarify, Namita, if a student applies for a particular college, but they don't qualify, how does the university decide what college they might get an offer from if they are still well qualified?
So that's an internal process that they have. Like I mentioned, when I applied, I interviewed at the college that I put on my form, which was St. John's, and I was automatically assigned St. Peter's. They assign the second college where you interview, and typically, if you don't get in the college that you don't get a place in the college that you applied to, you will get a place in the second college. Sometimes you might even get a place in another college. That's just an internal process that they have. But essentially, if you're a qualified applicant, they will make sure that you are assigned a space somewhere, assigned a space in one of the colleges. Any more questions? Okay, well, I'll end by just saying that I think, students who are going to be successful in this process, do you suggest preparing? Oh, 100% you got to prepare for the interview. Yes, absolutely. The interviews, like I mentioned, are very academic, and distance between the colleges. Yeah, I'll answer that question in a second, Jessica. Let me quickly answer the interview question. The interview is something you should prepare for because like I said, it's, high school students might not necessarily inherently know how to, do well in an Oxford interview. Sometimes you're going to have a good cop and a bad cop in an interview. Sometimes they're going to corner you. Sometimes they're going to ask you questions, like ridiculous questions that you don't even know. Like I said, I walked into my interview and they asked me what a molecule was. I mean, I had no idea what it was, but the boarding school that I attended had, given me enough preparation, and I was able to kind of say, okay, well, I don't know what this is. I said it to them, but I'll tell you what I do know. So that was a good start. You do need to prepare, and typically you should ask a teacher in that particular subject to spend some time with that candidate or that applicant and give them extra information about that subject above and beyond high school. Because the A-level of the pre-U curriculum, which is the British curriculum, is also very in-depth. I mean, unlike the IB or the APs or, the American High School Diploma, when you're an A-level student, you end up studying 3 or 4 subjects in depth in 11th and 12th grade. And typically the Oxbridge level is higher than that. So you would need to know more about your subject, a lot more than what is just taught at high school. This is even for British students. So they do need to do reading above and beyond. They do need to understand a little bit of, first year university level concepts, and be able to talk about their thought process. I mean, one of my students went for a physics interview, and his one question was, imagine you went to the beach and you picked up a bucket of sand. Can you tell us can you estimate the number of grains of sand that are in that bucket? Again, you have to, it's a tough question. They want to make sure that you know the formula, that you know, like that, you know, assume that the grain of sand is, you know, the area of a sphere maybe, which is 4/3 pi r cubed, and then you're estimating that there's air inside. How are you looking at the volume? They just want to know your thought process, and they will prompt you along the way. They'll guide you, but that can be just like a half an hour question. It's kind of like a management consulting question, you know, when you apply for a job. That can be a question, or they can ask you to sketch something. It's just about, if you don't know how to answer it, or you don't know the answer, you most certainly will not know what they're asking you. They just want to know how you think about it, and then if they prompt you along the way, whether you're able to figure it out or not. So yeah, you should prepare for these interviews. You should get your students to sit with, you know, subject-specific tutors and subject-specific teachers who can help the student really be able to talk about that subject. Because I've seen a lot of students that are really good at examinations, they're good at doing well in exams, but the minute you ask them to discuss something about their subject, they're not really able to do that. And it can happen with practice. And that's exactly what they're testing, because that's what you're going to do when you get to Oxford or Cambridge. You're going to have to be able to discuss your subject area. Okay, so there's another question here about, yeah, the distance between the colleges. Can you explain? Yes, so typically Oxford and Cambridge are university towns, and the colleges are dotted around the town. Okay, now certain colleges are, like, obviously they're in different locations, like I mentioned. Now like at Oxford, for example, there's something called Science Park. This is where the physics building is, the biochemistry building, the chemistry center, everything is there. Now the closest college to the Science Park is Keble, and then there's Wadham. So it's just the distance near the particular department. It's not a big deal. I mean, most students, you know, will invest in a bicycle and cycle around Oxford and Cambridge even, and you can access your department. But if that is something, you know, you want to look at when you are applying to a college, there are certain colleges that are a lot further away from the academic buildings than others. So that's what I meant by the geography of the city. Okay, if a student is interested in psychology, do they choose the specific field of psychology they want to study, significant psych or social psychology? If I'm not mistaken, I don't know whether Oxbridge actually offers a psychology major. So I'll have to check that, but I don't think they do. In fact, I'm pretty sure that they don't have a psychology major. Are there any more questions? US colleges US colleges require us to send official reports of our SAT, and after admission submit official AP scores. Does Oxbridge require this, or is it no? So what ends up happening is that, okay, so if your student is applying through a school that has a UCAS account, so a lot of times a high school will create a UCAS account. And what ends up happening is that they will submit the application on your behalf. So if I'm a student applying through XYZ high school, my high school will give me something called a buzzword, and I will start a UCAS account, and I'll put in the buzzword, and I'm automatically connected to my school. So what will happen is I fill out my part of the application, which is essentially my 5 colleges, personal information, personal statement, and I click on send. Then what happens is this UCAS form will go to my school counselor. It doesn't go directly to UCAS. It goes to my school counselor. My school counselor will upload my predicted grades. So what they think I'm going to get at the end of 12th grade, depending on what curriculum I am. They will upload a letter of recommendation. There's only one letter of recommendation that you're allowed on UCAS. And yes, that's something that I should mention, that if typically, if you are applying, if a student is applying to Oxbridge, asking a subject-specific teacher to write the letter of recommendation probably will be more effective than a general counselor recommendation, you know, where you're talking about how great they are in the school and the community, and how they did MUN and how they did, you know, how their head boy, which is great information, but actually Oxford just wants to know like how much math or how much English or how much history does this person know, and their subject teacher will probably be in a much better position to discuss that. So you can do that. And then once you've filled out that part of the application as a school representative, you then send it out to UCAS. Now, if your school doesn't have, isn't registered with UCAS, that student will apply independently on UCAS, and they will, the student will be asked to give the name of their recommender and an email address of the recommender, which then UCAS will contact directly. And in terms of self-reporting the scores, typically the board will, you know, you have to, like the IB will send the scores to UCAS, or the Cambridge board will send it on UCAS. And this can also be updated through your school if you work through UCAS, or it's just done through the governing body that takes the exams. Yeah, I'll be applying as an individual. That's absolutely fine, Rishi. Like I said, you just have to put the name down of the recommender and the email address of the recommender. One thing that I do want to say, Rishi, is that if you've spoken about some kind of research that you've done in math, you know, and you've done something extensive in that area that you want to talk about, it's good if your recommender can mention that too, so that it's kind of, you know, verified or justified. I mean, that's a similar, you know, policy that we use for American universities as well. But if you've spent like, you know, a quarter of your personal statement talking about a math research project that you did, it would make sense for your recommender to also talk about that. And they should spend about 80% of the personal statement, sorry, the letter of recommendation talking about how fit you are to study that subject. High school senior applies with only 3 APs with scores of 5. From whom does the assurance of a 5 on the, yeah, from whom does the assurance of a 5 on the remaining exams come? So that comes from your school. Is the AP teacher sufficient? Yes, that's sufficient, absolutely efficient. Does the student need to, no. Well, like I said, these offers, Marla, are conditional, right? Like, so my school can predict that I'm gonna get a 45 in the IB. They can say that I'm gonna get a 7 in everything. I can do really well on the entrance test. I can do really well on the interview. But Oxford and Cambridge are still gonna say to me that to get your seat, you're gonna have to achieve that 45 in the IB. So, or 42 or 42, whatever they want. And only if I get that am I in. You're not necessarily, it's a conditional offer. It's not like the US admissions process where, you know, early decision you find out by mid-December, or by April 1 you know whether you're admitted or not. And if your GPA falls like a little bit, they're fine. It doesn't work like that with Oxbridge and the other top UK universities. They want you to achieve the particular score that they're asking for at the end of grade 12. So as a school, you also have to be very careful which candidates you put forward, because if you're gonna year on year send students who you're predicting really high scores for and none of them end up getting it in the exam, then that's essentially like, you know, Oxford and Cambridge say, well, from this school, they always say that this person's gonna get, you know, like a 5 or 4 5s or 45, 43 or something, but they don't end up actually getting those grades. Are there any college counselor associations in the UK like IECA in the US? Actually, I'm not aware of that. That's a good question. I think the reason that there's not so much hype about college admissions in the UK is because they're so academically focused. Most of the universities are, like I said, all of them are public. They're not private universities. They're all you know, you apply through the system called UCAS. All universities, it's not just Oxford and Cambridge, it's other universities, all other universities in the UK as well, will publish a minimum entry requirement where they're looking students to achieve a certain grade before they can come to that university. So that's really how it works. Yes, your personal statement is important. A few of the extracurriculars you do outside are important, but it's not an all-encompassing process like it is in the US, where they really look at everything. Yes, if your school is a UCAS, if the school does have a UCAS account, you should apply through school. That's the best way to do it, because the school will then send the application for you. Yes, you can also add your buzzword later. I mean, it doesn't mean that you have to start another account. There is a process on UCAS where you can say that I want to affiliate myself with a school, and then you add your buzzword and you're automatically then affiliated with your high school. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found this presentation useful. I have shared my email address in the chat. I will just share it again one more time. So if any of you have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer. I will also send you all some resources, some articles as well that I've written on this Oxbridge application process. And if any of you do have students that are interested in Oxbridge, I'd be more than happy to help or get on a phone call. So please reach out. We're all here to help each other. Thank you very much.